Hey everyone, have you ever wondered what it takes to be a successful leader? Well, join me because in this video I'll share my own personal journey of transitioning from a follower to a leader. I'll share some of the key resources I used and some of my key findings that I learned along the way. So let's get into it. Maybe as a bit of background, I'll just say that I've never really been a leader of people. I've never really had much desire to organize people or direct them in any way. I generally like people to just kind of do what they want to do and give them ultimate freedom and flexibility because that's something I really value. So kind of with that backdrop, I entered the world of work, and again, no real desire to lead or manage anyone, but what I was keen on doing was just delivering exceptional work. And that's essentially what I focused on for, I'd say, the first 6 years of my career, is just delivering exceptional results. And the problem with that strategy is that at some point you reach a kind of limit because you can only get so far by just delivering the same pieces of work over and over again. Your career kind of stagnates, tolerance to do that kind of work kind of reaches a limit as well, so you kind of get bored. So there's a natural kind of step where you want to be delegating some of your work to your juniors and then also taking on more kind of leadership, managerial responsibilities. And I actually remember that happening to me very clearly. I'd just been promoted to a more senior level. I'd worked like crazy to get that promotion. I'd found 2 new investments for our portfolios. I'd written up a huge amount of research material on them to ensure that they got places in the portfolio. I was just ready and raring to do that again the year after I got promoted. And I remember my boss at the time just kind of said, no, your juniors need to do that now. And so began the kind of process of understanding what it means to be a leader, what work should I be doing as a leader, what direction of travel did I actually want my career to go in. And I knew that if I didn't get my head around those things and understand those things, then I wouldn't be able to progress any further in my career. And obviously I wanted to progress in my career. I said I wasn't like a natural leader or, organizer of men, but I recognized that in this kind of hierarchical corporate structure that I was part of, that was a necessity. So it's something I had to learn. I set about, again, in my usual kind of style, reading as much as I could on the topic. So there are a couple of books that really got to me on this topic. One is Team of Teams, and that's about how, by General Stanley McChrystal, and that's about how in the army they had to move away from this command and control or dominance style leadership to a more decentralized form of leadership because it was the only way that they could move nimbly enough to attack an enemy. So that taught me a lot about how it's important to particularly delegate decision-making functions as well. In the book they talk about how rigid hierarchies can actually be very fragile, and one of the most kind of robust forms of hierarchy is decentralized control. So that was one of my really important takeaways from that book. So I just mentioned in that story as well the difference between kind of command and control / dominance leadership and kind of decentralized leadership, where you basically give as much kind of control to your subordinates as possible, which is ultimately more effective. I kind of think of that as well as like in terms of like extractive leadership, regenerative leadership. So the idea that the leader at the top kind of extracts all the useful information from their people and makes a decision, probably extracts all the resources from their people as well, and becomes the richest, a more robust and resilient and sustainable form of leadership is decentralizing control, decentralizing decision making, and ensure that resources are fairly spread out amongst the people in the team. I think it's really important as well when we think about sustainability is like, how do you create a sustainable, well-functioning team? It's definitely the more regenerative approach. So yeah, that was key learning from that book for me. Then there's The Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, and that's quite an interesting book as well. It talks about this idea of like serving leadership. Most people think of a leader, they think of someone who's in charge, who can delegate, who has the most power and the most influence. But The Culture Code talks about how actually some of the most successful leaders of all time have been what they call serving leaders. So leaders that aim to principally serve their people first, and that kind of initiates the law of reciprocity, creates a virtuous cycle, and the more respect that's given to the people, the more they can receive in return as a leader. And then there's also the book called Rebel Ideas by Matthew Syed. Really interesting book on the power of diverse teams, but it also touches on this point of command and control leadership versus prestige leadership. And prestige leadership is essentially you're so awesome at your job and people just love you, aim to do whatever they can to help you and follow you anyway. Whereas command and control is kind of like a more dominance form of leadership where you're at a certain position in the hierarchy, therefore you get to tell people what to do. So after reading these books, realizing that I had to take on more leadership responsibilities, I went all in on this kind of prestige serving leadership, which worked really well. I was actually really effective in leading teams, continued to deliver amazing results through project-based work. One of them was put option strategy on the S&P 500 at literally the perfect time to profit from the COVID-19 crisis. So that was a particular highlight. And I would say I achieved those successes mainly through this form of serving leadership, essentially through allowing other people to be the best in themselves and helping manage conflict within the group. I would think of myself as a kind of buffer to people's emotions and trying to keep everything in check and ensuring that all the best information was coming to light. People felt comfortable airing their grievances and getting everything out in the open. Because I believe that led to essentially the most or the best information reaching myself, and that gave me best decision-making capabilities, essentially. That's another point that actually is a difference between this kind of command and control structure versus this decentralized leadership. Is command and control basically assumes that the leader at the top will always have perfect information, which is very rarely true in this day and age. Quite often it's the people ground, so in an army sense, the boots on the ground, that would actually have the best information. So it's more important to delegate some of that decision-making capacity to those people on the ground with the best information so they can act and respond accordingly and quickly. Some of my successes were actually directly linked to reading these books and understanding how to get the best out of people and following this kind of serving leadership structure. For more on serving leadership, there's actually a book called Shackleton's Way, which talks about Ernest Shackleton, obviously an amazing explorer. It talks about how he was able to basically keep his men together and keep their morale up when they got stranded through this form of serving leadership. Serving leadership might be counterintuitive, but from my own experience and from everything I've read, it's definitely the way to go. So always be thinking about how you can serve your teams, and I think they'll repay you in the bucket loads. So yeah, went through this period of serving leadership, but then I realized that I'd potentially gone too far that way, because although serving leadership is kind of known to be the best form of leadership or the most effective, it's not people's intuitive understanding of leadership. Because when people think of leaders, they think of the people on the telly, they think of people in films, people that basically are large and in charge and kind of tell other people what to do because they're in a position of dominance. I had completely neglected that. I very rarely told people what to do. I didn't really like the idea of dominating people in a certain way. I'm also an introvert, so I actually quite liked operating, kind of behind the scenes on the email, being the connector amongst members of the team. And I realized that while that was effective, it wasn't really getting the seniors, or that's what I thought, because I wasn't being promoted or receiving the recognition that I thought I deserved. So I realized that something must be wrong here, and I decided to go back to the drawing board and realized that what I was really missing was this command and control / dominance style form of leadership, but I didn't really have that kind of leadership presence. And I think some of that came from my own self-confidence. Despite having all these successes, I didn't really feel like I had the confidence to lead this group. So maybe that's imposter syndrome to some extent. And then also I mentioned that I wasn't naturally inclined to lead people, which probably showed like I would do it, but it's not my happy place. I hadn't put much kind of time in with the senior people as well. I hadn't really done well at promoting or marketing what I'd done. And I've now done loads of research on marketing and sales, and it's probably the best thing I could do for my work is to make sure as much people know about it as possible. So with these 3 learnings, I decided I really had to kind of set about improving my leadership presence. The way I got around that was I started to build my own personal brand, I would say. And so I started to do lots of extreme kind of sporting events. I did a marathon, I did a cycling ultra race, and I feel like these 2 things, while they gave me a lot of self-confidence as well, that I could achieve and do hard things if I put my mind to it, I think it also gave me a great reputation at work. I also, through the cycle club, became a ride leader. Ride leading is, I would say, more of a command and control style of leadership, given its kind of sport, and it's a very clearly defined task, and I don't know the people that well. So that really enabled me to kind of come out of my shell and be more of a person in the limelight, and the person that was able to kind of direct people in small kind of groups, and I would say small scale emergencies as well. So that was great for that. And then I had to work on my own sales and marketing. So still working on that, but I think just cultivating my own personal brand and understanding what it is that I have to offer and double down on that, and making sure that people know about it as well. So that's really helped increase my leadership presence and build that kind of command and control dominance style of leadership within the group. I'm still working on that. It's not something that I love, but I think through continuing to leverage on the good aspects, so the prestige style leadership and the emotional style of leadership, I think that I'm still able to deliver good results. Overall, it worked out very well. I eventually got promoted into that leadership position, and I'm gradually becoming more comfortable in that position. I actually kind of read as well that as you progress in life, your amygdala starts kind of firing as you kind of move outside your comfort zone, and that often causes people to pull back. So maybe I was experiencing some of that. But the happy thing about pushing through that is that once you achieve your progress, you kind of reset your baseline and then you become more comfortable there. So I've definitely started to feel that. I think some of the key learnings that I've taken away from this, definitely important to find a delicate balance between command and control and prestige or dominance hierarchies and serving leadership. Really important to find that balance because you don't want to go 100% on one because it doesn't work. I think another learning is to remember to give as much as possible and become a serving leader, because then that again initiates that law of reciprocity and your subordinates will pay you back in spades. I think a lot of people think of leadership as command and control dominance, and sometimes they think they need that. But what they actually need is that more prestige style of leadership, that more serving style of leadership that caters to their emotional needs. And Daniel Goleman's book, Primal Leadership, talks about this in a brilliant way. He said that command and control is only necessary in emergencies. The rest of the time you want to be catering to their emotional needs, and that's generally being kind, respectful, making them feel safe, all this kind of softer stuff which I think people often kind of brush under the carpet. And then the final point is I learned that reputation is really important, and maybe that's part of my kind of sales and marketing spin on things, because reputation is everything and leadership is about self-restraint. I think it says in Napoleon Hill's Laws of Success, like moral high ground. So it's about being someone to look up to and respectful. That's something I learned the hard way as well. As I progressed through my career, I definitely let some of parts of my reputation fall due to, just being naive and young, I would say. So definitely reputation is everything. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. That was my story about transforming from a follower to a leader. If you want to hear more from me, then don't forget to check out this video.